A beautiful morning to you, our dear viewer, once again, and thank you for keeping it to Church of Uganda Family TV. It is now time for us to go to issues at hand. Well, I remember we are powered by Protea Hotel by Marriott in Entebbe. Very wonderful place to go to. The numbers are just there below the screen. You can contact them for booking. Of course, they have wonderful services when it comes to hotel services in Uganda here. So please reach out to Protea Hotel by Marriott in Entebbe and surely do get yourselves those wonderful services you could get from a hotel. So today is a Monday and it is a very special day. We're going to be discussing fundamental issues that are affecting us in the country. You know, we have been having challenges in the country, mostly to us, the people, the public. The trust we have in our politicians is also on a verge. Like, we have lost much interest in these people because what they are doing when we send them there, by the way, not everyone, there are few of them. So when we send them there, you will find they are doing their own things. We are having corruption scandals. These ones are fighting themselves. So the trust is really low, which you can say is a feeling of disenchantment in our politicians. And how is this all hindering the economic development of our country? How is that hindering the development of our country? That is what we are going to be discussing here today. And recently we had a report released by Afro Barometer, and of course which we'll know later here, and the report had related a number of findings, and of which also the kind of trust we have with our politicians is what I've been mentioning has also, I think, gone low compared to the findings by the Afro Barometer. So here with me today is Mr. Francis Kibirige, who is going to take us through this interesting topic, but also give us highlights of where he is from, which is Afro Barometer, what they do, and their interest in the public. Very good morning to you, Mr. Kibirige.
Thank you very much, Mr. Linaite, for having us here today, and for this great opportunity to speak to Uganda and to the people of God on this great, very important family TV show.
Wow.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for accepting as well to come and join us and give us some interesting information. So what is Afro Barometer, first of all? What do you do?
Thank you. Afro Barometer is a non-partisan Pan-African research network that has, for the last 25 years, conducted public opinion studies to basically learn, understand, and track public views on how we are developing in their own perspectives under the bigger theme of democratic development. So this year, July, Afrobarometer is celebrating 25 years of doing this work in now 42 African countries since July 1999. And Uganda has been one of those countries that have been consistently covered from the beginning. Our first survey here was in the year 2000, and to date we've conducted 13 surveys in Uganda. So in these 42 African countries, every about 2 years roughly, we go back to that country and conduct a fresh random survey that covers the entire country to understand if there are any changes in how people, ordinary people, perceive democratic development. Our surveys are under the broad theme of quality of democracy and governance. It's not enough to simply say we are democratic, but how strong, how advanced is our democracy? Can we track it and say, last year we were here, now we are here, and to get there we need to do A, B, C, D, based on public opinion. Now, we have an overall objective. We have like three objectives, but overall, our major objective is to take this voice of public opinion and aggregate the views of all Ugandans represented in that survey and present this view to those who can be able to intervene. Our leaders, for instance, government in particular, government agencies, civil society, institutions like the church, the cultural institutions. For instance, if people in village X or sub-region Y identify water or maybe health service provision as their key issues, then that's what we share. If people mention corruption and its incidence is increasing, that's then what we report. It's a culture within the Afro Barometer across all these countries that this research, once conducted, should not sit idle in our libraries. It should be communicated. It should be presented to those who can infuse it into either policy programming or actual program interventions on the ground, so that lives can be impacted. And we are donor funded, but every donor you know of that funds government, civil society, and other actors also fund the Afro Barometer over the 25 years. So we are not in any way special. These surveys, we say they are scientific. They are a little bit different from surveys that maybe most people are familiar with, but they are scientific in the sense that we conduct them on an international level and are able to say, if you went back and followed our steps, then you will arrive at similar results such as we've found within a known margin of error. And these surveys are nationally representative, meaning they conform to the standards of conducting scientific research in each of those 42 countries where we go. In Uganda, our surveys are peer-reviewed to conform to that process. So we will go to the Uganda National Council for Science and Technology, which is a body enacted by an act of parliament to supervise all manner of scientific research in Uganda. And they give you a research permit, a research certificate. And then that's what we carry, and we again work with other national institutions like the Uganda Bureau of Statistics to access census data that allows us to select a sample of adult Ugandans that then we go to interview at the household. So when we reach the villages, we introduce ourselves to the local councils, and the local council officials, not to ask for permission, but to let them know we are in your area. And then we go to the households. The households are randomly selected. And then we request if they would allow us to speak to them about issues that concern them, concern the area in development, concern their households. And if they accept to take part in the study, then we randomly choose one adult from that randomly selected household. 8 households in a village, one member from each. And that's the person we talked to for about 1 hour on average. And we ask about 160 individual questions. Some of them have smaller parts. Anyway, you get the idea. So this way we aggregate all these views from about 2,200 individual Ugandans to aggregate a national picture. And that's what we share here today.
Oh, wow. Last week you released a report, a survey. Can we know how you came to this?
Okay. Earlier on I said we are celebrating 25 years, and we looked across all those 13 surveys we've conducted in Uganda and identified a couple of issues that are pertinent to Ugandans. There were issues like corruption, issues like poor quality service delivery in the far-flung areas especially. There were issues of economic issues such as unemployment, taxes and rates. But we also wanted to look at an issue that every Ugandan has the capacity to change. Because we've seen, it's a culture here, we are Ugandans, that we always want someone to do something for us. Oh, government hasn't been done this. Oh, this government agency hasn't done this. Oh, our leaders haven't. How about us? So we looked at this particular issue that appears to be growing. And that's the problem of this unending level of violence whenever we go into multi-party competition.
Yes.
No doubt, Ugandans support the idea that we should have very many political parties so that we have enough choices, we as voters, to choose who we really want to govern us, to lead us. Fine. But very many Ugandans also have this view that whenever these many political parties compete, then there is violence, and the violence is growing. Actually, to date, in the survey we conducted this January 2024, the proportion who say many parties are needed are 77%, but those who say whenever parties compete there is violence are 74%. So almost the people who want multipartyism also see violence. And there has been an escalation over the years. So our understanding and appeal is that this is something we all can address in our small steps with our neighbors, with the people we are with in the taxis, with the people we are with, but also our leaders when they are conducting their multi-party business. Say they are canvassing for support, in about a year and a half we are going back to polls. We would want this addressed, that as we compete, as we demand, as we agitate for what we think is rightly ours, as we speak about the shrinkage in the spaces where we think we are supposed to operate, we as political parties, as individuals, let's give peace a chance. So because we thought this was a bigger call than a research network like the Afro Barometer can take on, we are big, okay, we are in 42 African countries, we are headquartered in Ghana, we have regional directorships for Eastern Africa, 12 countries. We are headquartered at the Institute of Development Studies in Nairobi, at the University of Nairobi. But that's not enough. So we ran to the Interreligious Council of Uganda, because this is an umbrella of our spiritual leaders. And they have this wonderful peace-building program that they run regularly, particularly very close to these contentious electoral issues. And I think during 2016, 2015, we nearly got a national dialogue. So we went to them and said, look, there is a lot of work here to do, but we can start small and start with individuals to say, let's have peace between us. Let non-elections divide us. Yes. Okay. So when we looked at these political parties and how they operate, we looked at them in 3 broad areas. So first of all, when we looked at how citizens perceive these political parties in 3 broad areas. First, we looked at the extent to which Ugandans perceive and support democracy. The second was, what's the citizens' development agenda? What's the citizens' development priorities? What is it that people really want that political parties should address? And then thirdly, we looked at how people look at these political parties, very interestingly. And then we also looked at citizens' optimism towards peace building. I will begin there. 65% of Ugandans today say that even though we are different in terms of our mother languages, we are different tribes, we are different faiths, religious faiths, we are of varying education levels, we are also of different social statuses, but there is so much more that can unite us, that unites us, than which divides us. That's very important. We also saw from these surveys that Ugandans really want democracy. No doubt about it. Because everyone wants democracy because of the democratic ideals. Everyone wants to be free, to be fair. Everyone wants to be equal, to be heard, to be freely able to associate with others without any encumbrances. Fine. And on the continent of Africa, Ugandans rank second in this preference for democracy, this commitment for democracy. But we rank 13th in seeing democracy at work, in being satisfied that we see democracy in our countries. And that's very important for us, for all of us, because democracy doesn't grow on trees. Democracy grows in us. It's us to embody and take on these ideals and live them. So then we will see democracy at work, especially among our leaders, but also amongst us. Secondly, Ugandans for, I think, 12 years, since 2011, have consistently named health, education, social services delivery, and infrastructure such as roads, fighting corruption, and agriculture services as the key, most important problems that they want our leaders to address first and foremost.
Yes.
And it's our call to all political parties and political movements to really focus on these issues and bring them to the fore and devise means of delivering them, because that's what people are worried about. When people look at their elected leaders, you've seen in our report that a growing number of us are being growing less and less trusting of our elected leaders at local government and parliamentary level.
Yes.
So we find that the proportion, for instance, who say that the elected local government councillor does their most, tries their best to listen to what ordinary people have to say, has dropped by 20 percentage points.
20%?
Yes, from 40% in the year 2005 to 25% today. And that's not good when we are going into elections, a year and a half. And these councillors are many. The question is, why do people say they don't listen when they are the ones who vote them into office?
Yes. With
regards to the same question posed about elected representatives to the National Assembly, 19%, only 19, less than a fifth of us in the year 2005 said our elected members of parliament try their best to listen to what ordinary people have to say. That number has dropped to 15%. And this
is terrible.
Yes, this kind of paradox is because of a twisting of what the elected leaders' mandate really is and what voters have grown to believe is their mandate. Okay. Whereas we elect these people to serve a specific mandate, to represent us, to legislate, for instance, in parliament, to hold the executive accountable.
Yes.
We voters, we've grown to think that we elect them to deliver development, to build roads, to build schools, to help us out when we are in need, when we are sick, when we don't have school fees. Really, one MP in Namibia told us that when he goes back to his country, to his community, constituency, he feels like he's a walking ATM, because every time he has to dish. But that is not their role. So when people say they don't listen, they mean they don't come and give us.
Okay.
But you also notice that because our politics is kind of upside down, that these people go through a lot to compete, to even win. Some mortgage everything they have, their homes, their houses, their land, and we really don't know who funds them. Because under multipartism, the political parties are supposed to nurture these leaders and present them to us and also support them. So the absence of a law, clearly, that stipulates how much one can raise to fund a campaign, and also who is it that should contribute and how much, and the extent to which this funding is accountable to a regulator, is creating all these problems. That tomorrow if I stand, I will never, I don't have political ambitions, but if I stand, I feel free to promise whatever I want. I will just vote me into office, forget all about these problems. But that's not true. So that speaks into the disenfranchisement you are talking about. And we see so many people giving up. And actually, the proportion who say that these leaders serve their own interests rather than serving the people has now reached 79%.
79%.
Yes, and that's not healthy when you are headed into a general election. Now, when we looked at political parties, I will summarize this one. We looked at citizens' outlook of these political parties on 3 metrics. The first one is the proportion of people who say they feel close to a political party. The second is the proportion of people who trust a political party. And third is the proportion who say they would vote that political party if they were an election tomorrow. We put a hypothetical question to say if elections were held tomorrow, which party or party's candidate would you vote? On these three metrics, the numbers for Uganda are dropping since 2019. And there is no political party that is not losing on those three metrics, including the ruling party. So, and interestingly, in the year 2000, political parties were in abeyance. They existed, but they didn't compete, they didn't cooperate, they only operated at the headquarters. The proportion of Ugandans who said they don't feel close to any political party was 75%, clearly. That number dropped to 31% in 2012, 2008, 2012, when people started joining political parties after 2005.
Yes.
But has since risen, and it is now the highest single proportion of identity with a political party. The people who say they don't feel close to any political party is higher than those who feel close to a ruling party or to all the opposition political parties. And we are headed into a multi-party election. Now, the problem is people mention this rising level of violence, that our leaders seem not to have space to speak, to agree, and it is permeating down to us. You find people who are not at peace with others, and sometimes people in the same camp, in the same political camp. And now, headed into a general election, this is something we need to address.
Sure.
Yes. Yeah.
Very interesting. Let's talk about the disinterest these electorates are having. How is this going to impact us majorly economically?
You can only say that it is not going to be positive, because usually we have seen when we are headed into elections bring a lot of optimism to everybody.
Yes.
And in our tracking of, for instance, commitment to democracy or any Ugandans are very optimistic. So those curves, commitment to democracy, support for a political party, identity with the political party, all those tend to go up when we are headed into elections. Because people are believing that maybe this is the time when all my problems will be solved.
Okay.
This is the time when we will elect this one person or these many people, and then we will have jobs, and then we will have incomes rising, then we will have infrastructure built, we will have better schools, better health care. Those are the hopes they have. And then when elections don't, then they flatten out. The curves drop. And now, what does really happen? So, when people are this disinterested and less trusting of those that they have voted, and mark you, this increasing level of violence is doing very many things, even before we get to the economic impact. First of all, there is an erosion in a trust of all state and non-state actors who have a role to play in managing elections, multi-party elections, beginning with the Electoral Commission.
Okay.
And, for instance, the police, the courts of law, and we'll say by extension, the security agencies. It's only, in our last survey, we only saw local and international election observers being ranked above 50%. All the others were below 50%. Because of when someone invests so much and the elections have become do or die, when they lose, they will try tooth and nail to see that they get a result, a positive result. Can they overturn this election? And if they can't, they will blame someone. Flip it on its head and look at that individual voter who doesn't trust the process. The number of those who say our elections are free and fair is decreasing. The proportion who say that the tallying, transmission, and declaration of results is accurate is reducing because of this violence. And I'm calling it violence here, but it is a big basket of what people, for instance, the accusations, the name calling, the mudslinging, and everything. Now, there is also an interesting aspect, the commercialization of our elections, that we have seen this growing. But interestingly, we put questions to our respondents and say, is it right or wrong for a candidate or a political party to offer you an incentive for your vote? And the majority say it is wrong for them to offer. And then we asked, okay, is it wrong for you, the voter, to take this incentive? They say, oh yeah, yes. It is not wrong at all. I'm entitled to it.
Hey.
And now you see people who say, even though you give me 1,000, 500, 5,000, that's okay. Because it is the last time I will see you. Because I believe you are not going to deliver what I want. So if you are offering me this little, just bring it. Thank you very much. And that is not healthy. That is not healthy. So on one hand, we see this uncontrolled expenditure because it is not good to throw a lot of money when you are not buying real goods and services.
Yes.
The experts, the economic experts, might tell us more of how that impacts indicators like inflation and so on. I'm not an expert in that area. But for me, I would want to say that from the perspective of citizen expectations, it is not good. One, this level of mistrust is distorting and is driving away people from... I talked about people shunning away from multi-party and from political parties. But they are equally shunning away from going to vote, to participate, going to take part in election campaigns. Because believe me, who would want to go into an election, for instance, campaign trail when they know there is going to be violence? Who would want to stake up their head and go and compete and register and be nominated when they know they are going to be abused from the word go? So you find that it is now being left to those who I would say are very brave, but those who feel that they can do better to stay away, they stay away. So it is very, very important for us as a country to address these issues and start, however small. We may not look at that grand occasion where our top leaders, say the president and those in the opposition, meet and shake hands. That may be far away, but we should start with our neighbors. We should start, we as individuals should start to give space to peace, to dialogue, and to harmony, and to peace building. Yes.
Very interesting there. And yes, we have seen a lot of politicians give out money majorly to the electorate during that time. And yes, just like you've heard, we do accept the money to come. But though, even thinking that it is not good. But the question there that could raise, is it the cause of the rampant corruption scandals we are having? Immediately when we return, we shall now dive into corruption that we are having, which was also highlighted in this survey.
Issues at hand, powered by
Protea Hotel by Marriott Entebbe. Comfort and luxury at its best.
Do you know that you can now enjoy great enriching shows anywhere through the Family TV app? Here is how to download it. Open Play Store on your phone. Search for the Family TV app. Click Install. After installing it, open it and enjoy enriching content anywhere, everywhere, anytime. Family TV, enriching lives.
Family TV, enriching lives. Family TV, enriching lives. Issues at hand, powered by
Protea Hotel by Marriott Entebbe. Comfort and luxury at its best.
Yes, comfort and luxury at its best. That is Protea Hotel by Marriott in Entebbe. So please do reach out to them. They have wonderful services for you when it comes to hotel. Here today we are discussing the impact of political disenchantment, and this is largely on Uganda's economy. We want to see this disinterest people have majorly on the politicians or the leaders we had trust in to no longer have now. What impact does it bring really? So before we went to the break, I brought to light the issue of politicians during elections giving in money. I was giving an example here during the break that there is a politician wraps 5,000 notes in a flyer and then pushes under your window, and then on the voting day when you're opening your door to go and vote, you know, of course, who you're going to vote. But of course, that calls an issue of if you can imagine a number of households in one constituency, how much is this man going to spend? And you're not leaving alone the issue of the whole campaign period, because I think we are going to start, we are voting in 2026, but we are starting next year. And even others are already on ground right now doing the campaign. So for the entire period, how much do they invest and how much do they get back in return? And I raised the question, could this be the cause of the corruption scandals we are having, because these people want to pay back themselves? That is a question I'm just raising. I'm not saying it is confirmed or sort of. But on the Afro Barometer report, we also had corruption in there.
Yes, these are issues that are very pertinent to the quality of our elections.
Okay.
And we are talking about elections today because we are interrogating this question of multi-party politics, multi-party dispensation, which the country reverted to in 2005 after that referendum. And Ugandans support it. But the challenges you have mentioned are really pertinent. I'll give you an example. Earlier on, I talked about the proportion, our findings in the survey of proportions who say it is very wrong for political parties and candidates to give election incentive. But it is okay for we, the voters, to take it. Okay. And they go ahead to say that when I take it, I will eventually choose the candidate of my choice, not necessarily the one who gave me the incentive.
It's so bad.
But then we realize that there are issues of self-reporting here, that people want to sound and appear morally right. But the fact that one can go out of their way to influence a vote, no doubt, campaigning is very expensive. Money is the world over. Monies that are meant to organize, okay, those gatherings, to bring people together, to have ability to speak to them, to engage them, to hear from them, so you enrich your campaign, your manifesto, and the issues you interrogate, the cost is high. But the fact that we are going further to directly influence the decision, not on campaign issues we are standing on, but to give incentives. Some incentives are in cash. Some incentives are big promises. The promises, for instance, here and elsewhere, there are people who have been promised big in small groups to say, oh, your children will go to school.
Yes.
Or your house will be completed. And things like that are big to people. For me, when I speak to people about these issues, I say the money you received in that campaign, the 500, the 5,000 you received, what were you able to do with it? The bar of soap, actually not a bar, a piece of soap. What were you able to do with it?
Kilogram of sugar.
The kilogram of sugar or half. Yeah. Is it enough? Is it enough to say it's a correct substitute for the mandate that you gave to this individual to go and represent you? And for me, that's where it gets harder, that the work of these leaders has become more and more difficult, perhaps tripled, if not quadrupled, because it is very difficult to stand, and that's why we see that after each general election, 60-70% of incumbents don't return, because they are being wrongly evaluated by the electorate. And this idea of campaign malpractices of a corruption nature you have mentioned, that people offer these incentives uncontrollably, is eroding trust in the actual leadership that we are trying to build. We would rather go back to a time and a space where these leaders are nurtured, first of all, in political parties that are built on ideals, ideals and ideologies that are well articulated and communicated to the people, number one. Secondly, that these leaders are functional, strong institutions. We've built political parties, both in the ruling and in the opposition. Sometimes you feel are built on individuals. I know there is a time when we went to elections under the movement system, when those who stood as candidates stood on individual merit. When we came over to multi-party competition, the individual merit kind of persisted as well. So you have leaders that are on their own standing, but they are also standing under political parties. And then you wonder, okay, who nurtured them? Who prepared them? Who funds them? And then you look at their conduct. When, for instance, there has been issues in a single political party, and that political party has faced challenges, you've always looked and wondered, is there any level above these leaders in a party to bring them together, to say, let's talk? And it appears none. And when leaders leave this party and go to another, or are dismissed, the thinking is that maybe they will go with their followers. Maybe their followers will stay where they were. What our data shows is some people, and a big number, are just giving up and going away. And that's not good. Why do I insist on this? If we are under multi-party dispensation, political parties matter. Why do they matter? I don't have to belong to any of them. I don't belong to any of them. But take an example of the Uganda Premier League. If there are only 2 or 3 strong teams that beat everybody, the quality of our league will be low, and none of these teams will ever win an African continental championship.
That's right.
Or if it is competition is in schools, if 1 or 2 schools are very strong and others are so weak they are beaten in sports every now and then, in that sports competition, then even those winners will be weak. But the idea is all teams competing in that league should be helped to stand strong. And the spirit is there. In Uganda, for instance, there is an intention to, for instance, provide a financial package to every political party so they can stand. There is also a provision under the law for all political parties to meet and talk and dialogue, leave alone iPod, which is kind of a loose organization, but otherwise very important as well. So, but these are not functional. We need to fund these processes and to strengthen them so that we don't just look on as political party XYZ disintegrate. Because when they do so, our democracy, the level of democracy in Uganda is hard. Because we should be able to pay attention to that and grow rather than stagnate our democracy or even regress it. Yes.
Wow, very interesting. So in the report there, people out there, I think we are being the ones being challenged now, because we have decided to bring on our leaders to to things they do not really they may not be managing. Like I was seeing a report from the IGG, a member of parliament on average, mostly for those up country where they are not much congested, maybe they do not have much population in there. On average, that member of parliament uses 50 million Ugandan shillings a month. And how much does he earn? Just is it 22 million sort of? So it is relatively low. He's working in deficit. And that is happening every month. And then for a person like here in Kampala, they use on average 60 million Ugandan shillings a month. So it is very terrible. The demands we are putting them to, they are totally off what they are supposed to be doing. But well, that calls for a lot of information to be given to us, majorly now, like the survey from the Afro Barometer. So my question is, do we have a way forward to these challenging moments?
Yes.
Do you, like after finding the report, do we also have a provision of the way forward?
Yes.
Very interesting.
And like I've said before, number one, to all of us as Ugandans, we have to look ourselves in the mirror, look in the mirror and critically examine ourselves and say, what is it that we really want? Fine, we want multi-party competition, so we have enough choices amongst those that are standing to choose who our leaders are. Great, everyone wants that. But we should not have violence alongside that, because violence can be uncontrolled.
Yes. And
mixing social media, the fact that any individual can publish without an editorial review, sometimes not even after verifying what they are sharing, that can be dangerous. Rumors and rumor murmuring, disinformation and misinformation can become rife if they are mixed together with this notion of violence, electoral violence. And remember that this violence is not only physical. There is, for instance, I didn't want to break all of this up on air, but you can look at physical and non-physical forms of this violence. And the fact that it is happening amongst us within these political groups is not healthy. So what's the way forward? Number one, we need to give peace a chance. We need to give dialogue a chance. It's okay if we disagree. We are not always going to be agreeing. But if we disagree, we should also give a chance to agree and have an arbitrator between us. And if everything fails, one of us can just say, you see, it's okay, I concede for the sake of going forward. We don't have that culture. So we seem to be in North Quarters. I was in North Court. So we seem to say we either win or you lose. And, and that's not healthy. So secondly, we have to go back and look at these political parties as institutions and help them whenever we can, to help them stand, to help them stay strong, stay healthy, and be institutions, because we've tended to build them on other platforms rather than ideals. Okay, we've built them on individuals, on waves, on seasons, and when these change, we are left with nothing to stand on. So we need to build them on very strong, identifiable ideals. Then thirdly, we need very strong laws. Laws that govern the campaign process. I'm not saying we don't have them, but they need to be a little bit more clarified, especially on the issue of campaign financing. Okay? What are the caps? Do we need them? Thirdly, we need a very strong enforcer of these rules and laws. Not necessarily the Electoral Commission, because sometimes when you think about this Electoral Commission, you think they are overloaded. One, they organize, supervise, and deliver the election on one day. That's no easy thing to do, okay? You just saw how we counted the whole of us in 10 days. You know what it was. Now, how about all of us go to cast a ballot and have it counted in that same period? It's not easy. So, secondly, they are in charge of registering all political parties. Then they are also in charge of supervising the financing, campaign financing. Those roles need to be separated, or the Electoral Commission needs to be supported more in order to hold these functions more strongly than they have done. And then 3, we need to act fair. Okay, we need to act fair and listen to all sides. If, for instance, the political opposition says the space where they are operating is shrinking, when they convene, they are dispersed because of a law that they think is unfair. We need to listen to those voices and deliver that health competition. We could be, say for instance, the ruling party might say that in their efforts to maintain law and order, they are misunderstood, maybe institutions like the police. Yes, let's listen to them. Let's give them a chance to say, okay, where do they find challenges? This idea of us being able to talk is more helpful than us willing to push to exclude, because eventually all of us will be involved in addressing these issues. And for me, it is very important to stress that Ugandans in this survey, 65%, that's 2/3 of us, say we have enough to build on, enough to help us come together than there is to divide us.
Okay.
Yes.
Wow, very, very interesting. So I see time has started hitting us badly. But maybe if you could give us your parting shots in regards to today's discussion, majorly on the impact of this disinterest of the electorates to the people. How does this, I'm going to raise it for the second time, how has this impacted, or how does it intend to impact our overall development in the country?
You have to go back to what this multi-party political competition does. I'll give you a quick example. When we headed into 2021, I'll be brief, the Electoral Commission announced that there were 1.5 million positions to fill, from top to bottom. Now, we went into primaries. Just imagine there were maybe 3 people. In some cases there were 9 more. But let's just say, for argument's sake, that there were just 3 people who intended to compete on each of those positions. So 1.5 times 3 is 4.5 million.
Okay.
Let's say then we went into the general election. And again, for argument's sake, let's say there were 3 people that stood on each such position. In some positions there were more. That's another 4.5 million. So a total of 9 million people standing as candidates in an election where the entire electorate was about 17.5 million.
Wow.
So a half of us were competing. Take this to a classroom where we have all been before, and we used to be maybe 40, 50. But you are trying to vote leaders in your class, and half of you are vying. And you are spending out of the roof. You are quarreling, you are arguing, you are fighting. That does a lot. That does a lot to drain energies, to drain trust out of this system. And these holes need to be plugged so that we can move ahead. Yes.
Wow, thank you so much. And maybe your last words as we wind up this show today.
Yeah, so I would just say thank you very much for this wonderful opportunity and for the work that you do. We watch and we understand. We value the family values you bring on the show and on the station. So thank you very much and keep it up.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kibirige. Francis from the Afro Barometer, recently they released a survey which was last week, and it highlighted a number of issues. Last week on Wednesday, I hosted someone from the Uganda People's Congress, and they were discussing about democracy. By the way, let me ask that.
Go ahead.
Democracy levels, were we second in Africa?
That was reported out of context, I think, by one media.
Okay.
For us, we share. We don't control how you share it.
Okay.
Yes. But what we reported is that we are second on the continent, just behind Zambia, in aspiring, in demanding, in wanting democracy. That commitment we talked about. Yes. But in seeing democracy at work in our communities, we rank 13th out of 39 countries. And the Zambians rank second. In seeing democracy at work, they rank first in wanting it. We rank second in wanting it, but 13th in seeing it. That difference is the work we have to do. And just to tie this up, many people in Uganda see democracy in an electoral lens. Many people. This political party competition and lining up to vote and waiting to see the result is where most people see democracy. The rest, in between elections, just see something else. So when people are giving up on democracy, demanding and seeing less of it, a lot of it has to do with what happens during those elections. And that's why we say we need to pay attention to this one particular problem of violence that all of us are able to address. And if we do so, maybe these levels of those who perceive violence, when they go down, then the levels of those who see democracy might begin to go up. Democracy is not all about the absence of violence, but I mean, it may be a stepping ground. Yes.
Very interesting. We are heading to the election period, which will be starting next year. And next year, we shall be seeing the primaries majorly taking on. And then, of course, 2026 general elections will be coming up. So it has always been a little bit violent since the multi-party system took place here in Uganda. So we really I hope this time around the election violence does not really take course like it has always been. But well, it is a challenge and it hinders your development, because if there is a strike or a riot in your place, you're going to close the shop. That day you will not make a coin for yourself. So that is how this is all hindering our development here in the country. Well, that is issues at hand. We always discuss lots of issues, and I hope today I've picked something out of this discussion. My name is Luke Majumba Lenaitwe, and I want to wish you a lovely day. But remember, we are powered by Protea Hotel, by Marriott in Entebbe. Have a lovely day.
Issues at hand, powered by
Protea Hotel by Marriott Entebbe. Comfort and luxury at its best.
Family TV, enriching lives.